Friends, Bending Brothers, thank you once again for joining us in our weekly podcast. This is podcast number 7, and we are beginning with the Gospel of Mark. We have the Christ candle, which is a symbol of Christ's light. And as we continue to grapple with the things in our life and in our society, and as we try to make sense, let us allow the gospel to really, and the reading of scripture, to really challenge us into being the people of the light. And so we begin with the Gospel of Mark, which is the shortest gospel. And we are going to realize that Matthew and Luke is believed to have used Mark as a source. So Mark is the first gospel which was written. And we hear the words, we see the words immediately a lot in the Gospel of Mark. Because one, it is believed that the writer is trying so hard to not put the focus on himself, but the focus should be Jesus. He's trying to capture his readers so that the focus is on Jesus and not on himself as a writer. But also, the writer of the Gospel of Mark, which is believed to have been John Mark, was not part of the 12 apostles. It is believed that he used Peter as his source. He was the cousin of Barnabas, and when in the first missionary journey, he was the companion of Paul and Barnabas. But when there were arguments and challenges between Paul and Barnabas, it is believed then he then left that pack and became a companion of Peter. This is when he started then to be a scribe for Peter and jotted down each and everything in the life of Peter and in the journey of Peter. And Peter was this apostle who was, always speaking his mind, always impulsive, always so. So that's why the gospel is taking this tone and this speed. It's a fast gospel. There is movement from the beginning. From the beginning, he begins by in the wilderness story, and so it is the life which is reflecting Simon Peter the apostle, and he tries to get to the point as quickly as possible so that his readers will not lose the focus of Jesus. And so Mark writes, the primary writers of John Mark is the Gentiles. And that's why when John Mark begins, he begins with the wilderness story. And that is the focus of today's podcast. The wilderness. And so from the beginning, John Mark is clear about who he's writing to and why. And remember, as the first gospel which was written, there is still confusion between the Jews and the Gentiles about Jesus. Did Jesus die for everyone? Is the gospel that Jesus was teaching inclusive of those who are not Jews? So there is still confusion. Peter himself, even later in his life, get confused. There is a time when Paul rebukes Peter that when they were doing missionary or ministry, they had been eating with Gentiles, but as soon as the Jewish leaders came, Peter then changed and went to eat with those who were Jews. And Paul rebukes him to say you can't do that. So there's still confusion, there's still challenges between who this gospel, even within the apostles themselves. And yet, John Mark in this gospel focuses his attention on the Gentile because he wants to understand, he wants the Gentiles to understand that this gospel is a gospel that has came to liberate. And so John Mark takes the view of social holiness in this gospel. He takes the view of social liberation, so to say. He takes the view of, maybe one can say, of a black theologian, to say you as Gentiles need also to understand that you are made whole through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so from the beginning, the wilderness story, the voice is crying from the wilderness, saying, prepare the way. And friends, today we are dealing with a lot of racial tension, racial issues. We are dealing with tension of gender-based violence. We are dealing with things that divide us as society most of the time, because there are those that have been benefiting from the system and there are those that have not been benefiting from the system. And so John Mark says to the Gentiles, your voice matters. In fact, you are at the center of Jesus Christ coming and performing the miracles that he performs. And so immediately after the voice crying out, we see that Jesus is touching. And remember, in Matthew's gospel, we established that the key word was to touch, was that Jesus who touched. In Mark's gospel, we don't just see the Jesus who touched, we see the Jesus who goes, who availed himself into these places of displacement and challenges, and then touches the people and the realities of people. So the wilderness is not about hiding, but the wilderness narrative is all about understanding who we are in the whole narrative of a community that is divided, of a community who some benefit and some are not, and actually place ourselves in a space where we can make a change, an impact. So is the church in the wilderness? Is the church in the periphery? Is the church in places? Is the church placing itself in places where it can reach out and touch? Or now the church has placed itself in the city, in places where it has become inaccessible? Are we willing to deal with issues of race without feeling offended, but dealing with the real intricacies that are causing pain and harm? And so the wilderness, and John Mark, when he writes to his listeners, He wants his listeners to understand that your wilderness is actually a perfect place for you to be, because then you have placed yourself, you have positioned yourself in a space where you can touch the realities of those who suffer, of those that have been forgotten. And so, friends, Matthew's main teaching or main focus was discipleship. Mark's main focus, John Mark's main focus, is for people to understand the gospel of the wilderness and the power that it has to touch and to offend. Because those that are benefiting from the system are offended, and those that are in the peripheries and are forgotten are touched and impacted and are changed by this gospel. And so, friends, when we go through the gospel of John Mark, looking at the life of Peter immediately, are we going to be offended? Or are we going to, our realities are going to be touched and changed for the gospel to be real in people's lives? Is the gospel offending us? Because it is challenging that deep and the thrones which we have built, which are exclusive? Or is the gospel helping us to be life givers? And so that those are the two extremes. And you can hear the tone of John Mark, that he's writing to the people that have been down, that know what it is to be in a pit. And yet there are voices of people that continue to say, to discourage, because they want to keep those in the periphery